The girl confronts the unbearable millionaire who drove away all the waiters with his fury. Richard Vale sat there like a storm cloud in that cramped little diner, the kind you see flickering through neon at 3 a.m. Only it was broad daylight, and the rain hammered the windows so hard it sounded like a war drum. The air choked with fried grease and cheap coffee, a harsh contrast to the polished boardrooms and marble halls Richard was used to. Everyone else had bolted by now, pushed away by the crushing weight of his rage. Waiters and waitresses, one after another, had fled, faces pale and hands shaking, muttering about the billionaire's cold, unreachable rage. But here he was, alone. Except for her, Lily. She moved through the cramped space with ease, genuine as a fresh breeze. No fake smiles, no pretenses. Richard, the man who had built empires and crushed rivals without blinking, was suddenly caught off guard by the warmth in her eyes. It was a flicker, a crack in his. She poured his coffee without a word, the cup warm in his cold hands, the clink breaking the silence like a secret shared. His shoulders, usually rigid and squared tight with command, sagged just a little. The lump in his throat tightened as memories pried their way in. Claire, the only bright light who ever touched his impossible world, lost to a fog of tragedy he still couldn't unravel. The rage that chased away others whispered louder now. It made his hands tremble. His heart hurt in places he didn't want to name. But just when maybe, just maybe, he could breathe through the pain, a shadow lingered. Amanda, Claire's sister, always lurking in the corners, the sharp edges of her smile sharper than a knife. No one knew the real venom she carried, the way she slithered close to poison every chance at happiness Richard had. She fed the rumors, tasting them out like a venomous snake. And now, whispers started swirling around Lily. Dark, biting words meant to cut deep and ruin the. Who planted these poisonous seeds? His chest tightened, pain bursting like glass shards. But more than that, anger flared, blinding, furious. And for once, Richard felt a surge of courage that didn't retreat into cold walls or dollars. He would confront Amanda. He had to find the unbearable truth about Claire's death, about all the lies tangled around his heart. Would uncovering that darkness bring Lily closer, or tear them utterly apart? Richard couldn't guess. His fists clenched, the rain outside matching the storm inside him. Would he choose the empty security of his millionaire cage, or leap into the unknown, chasing something real? The question knotted tight in his gut as he sat, staring out at the wet city streets, caught between grief and hope. His world teetered on a razor's edge. The truth was waiting, somewhere in the shadows, and whatever it was, it would change everything. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important warning. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube has removed their subscriptions without warning. Just take a quick look at the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I don't want you to miss out on any exclusive content coming your way. And while you're there, leave that powerful like that helps me a lot with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know all the amazing people who are part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's interact. Richard's breath hitched. The rain thrashed the windows, but inside the tension was electric. Lily stood there, a beacon of warmth, unaware of the darkness lurking just outside. He could still sense Amanda's invisible threat, but just when he thought he could tether himself to this moment, the door swung open. A figure entered, drenched but determined. Richard squinted through the hazy light, and his heart dropped. It was... No, it couldn't be. But the resemblance was undeniable, a ghost made flesh. The air thickened, closing around him like a vice. She looked the same, yet different, her eyes holding a storm as wild as Richard's. Claire? He breathed, the name escaping like a prayer. She stepped forward, confusion plaguing her features. Richard, what's happening? The diner, once filled with the lazy clink of dishes and murmurs of conversations, fell into an oppressive silence. Heads turned. Murmurs spread, laced with disbelief and shock. Richard's world shattered and rebuilt in an instant, the truth twisting like a knife. Claire, the love he thought lost, stood breathing before him, and yet something felt very wrong. Lily's expression contorted, a flicker of betrayal glimmering in those warm eyes. What do you mean, Claire? There it was, the tremor, the slight crack in her facade. Her voice rose, firmer now, almost accusatory. You were dead. Claire's brow furrowed, her gaze darting between Richard and Lily. I don't know what you mean. I thought you... Each word was a pebble dropped into a stormy sea. I thought I was safe. A wave of cold washed over Richard. His pulse raced, clamoring in his ears. Memories collided. The accident, the tragedy that stole her from him. The funeral, the grief that shackled his heart. Safe from what? The tension shifted palpably, a visible wave that rattled the glassware on the tables. But before Claire could answer, a shout echoed from the back of the diner. Get away from her! It was Amanda, her voice slicing through the haze like a knife. She burst forth from the shadows, a predator with lethal intent. You don't belong here. Richard's breath hitched as he realized the truth. A chilling timeline unfurled. Amanda knew, but how? Every intuition he'd ever had about her whispered of deceit. But this entanglement was more sinister than he ever imagined. Claire's appearance had unspooled a dark thread he wasn't prepared for. It's not what it seems, Claire cried, panic bleeding through her voice. Amanda smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Oh, but it is. The diner felt smaller, suffocating. Richard's heart raced. What was hidden here? Secrets, lies, everything he held dear suddenly threatened to collapse in on him. The truth, ugly and raw, hung thicker than the humidity in the air. Richard, I need to, Claire began. But before she could finish, the lights flickered and a deafening crack of thunder ripped through the air. The moment stretched, tension razor thin, before everything erupted. It was chaos, tables overturned, voices screaming, the sound of shattering glass. And in the clamor, Richard saw it, a flicker of something deeper in Amanda's eyes. Joy? No, it was satisfaction. As she grinned, Richard's gut twisted. A connection slowly revealed itself, a chain forged in darkness. Everything he thought he understood unraveled before him. Claire's return held lies, and Amanda had been the architect of an intricate web, each strand weaving back to Richard's tragedy. Why? He yelled, the word torn from him in desperation. Amanda leaned closer, her face lit by a cruel smile. Because no one gets out clean, Richard, not really. And with that chilling revelation ringing in his ears, everything Richard believed hung in peril. Would he find answers, or lose everything again by chasing ghosts? The storm raged outside, but a tempest roared within him as the reality sunk deep. He had to confront not just the truth, but the very heart of the storm itself. What lay ahead was unfathomable, and he felt himself teetering on the edge of everything he knew. Richard's breath hitched, the chaos swirling around him like a blizzard. Claire stood there, her presence a surreal echo. Amanda was a jagged shadow, pressing in, twisting the air. The diner felt too small for the storm brewing among them. Claire's confusion mingled with dread, while Amanda's smile turned predatory. Richard's gut roiled. Something was off. Richard, please listen to me, Claire's voice trembled, cutting through the noise. I came back because... What? Because you were safe? Amanda scoffed, her tone biting. There's no safety here. The clamor of the diner faded to a dull hum, Richard's focus zeroing in on Claire. She looked so real, yet there was an uncanny edge to her. The flickering lights cast shadows that danced on her face. Richard's heart raced. He wanted to believe, to hold on to something tangible, but doubt coiled tighter. "Why now?" he shouted, frustration boiling over. "Why after all this time?" Amid the shouting, Richard spotted Lily's pale face, reflecting his own turmoil. Her brows furrowed, uncertainty shadowing her warmth. Panic flashed in her eyes. He wanted to turn to her, to reassure her somehow, but Claire's gaze had his full attention. Before Claire could answer, a deafening crash startled everyone. The front window shattered like glass raining down from the sky, sending shards scattering across the wooden floor. A figure surged through the remnants of glass, moving like a dark blur, colliding with Richard. "Get down!" yelled a voice, and instincts kicked in. Richard instinctively threw himself over Claire, protective instinct roaring to life. But instead of bullets or chaos, an explosion of confetti erupted, cascading colors across the floor, shimmering in the dim light. Gasps replaced shouts of terror. Laughter erupted next. A party outside. Richard blinked in confusion, heart still racing, pulse pumping through his veins. "What the?" he muttered, pushing off Claire, searching for answers. Then, through the confetti, a face emerged. A man with wild hair and an infectious grin, holding a megaphone, shouted, "Surprise! Happy Reunion Day, Claire!" Richard's mind spun like the colors floating through the air. What was happening? Yet Claire stood frozen, eyes wide with shock, heart pounding in horror. "What?" she breathed, a waver in her voice that cut into Richard. "Who are you?" The man's smile faded into genuine concern. "Claire, it's me. I came for you. Everyone's waiting." Richard felt the ground shifting beneath him, a jolt that broke through the storm he was caught in. Claire's expression twisted into something between disbelief and recognition. "Jared, you shouldn't be here." Jared's voice dropped, urgency creeping in. "You have to understand, it's not safe. They're coming for you." Richard's breath caught in his throat. The implications hung thick in the air. There was more to Claire's return, more than he ever grasped. Shadows, deeper than Amanda, lingered, lurking behind the faces he trusted. But it didn't stop there. The sound of sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Richard's chest tightened further. Who was after Claire? As the diner erupted into chaos once more, people scrambling, eyes darting around, the truth veered further away from him. Shadows converged. The names he thought he knew began unraveling. "Richard!" Lily's voice broke through, urgent and panicked. "What do we do?" Panic surged within him, tightening its grip. Wasn't the pain enough? Now there were layers upon layers, secrets thrumming under the surface like a bomb waiting to go off. Claire was alive, but that meant everything was turned upside down. "Get out!" Richard yelled, turning to shield Claire from whatever nightmare was creeping in, the pieces of the past collapsing all around them. "We need to go." The diner trembled as the door burst open again. A shadow loomed in the entrance. Not Amanda, not Jared, someone else. Richard's heart lurched as fear overtook him, the truth slipping through his fingers like smoke. What was uncoiling here? The storm was just beginning. The door swung open, and a heavy gust of wind rushed in, a chill washing over Richard as he turned to face the new arrival. The familiar tension hung thick in the air. But this newcomer disrupted the chaos, an imposing figure, cloaked in darkness, yet radiating an unsettling familiarity. It was Jonathan, Richard's estranged father, the man he thought had vanished from his life, leaving nothing but shattered dreams in his wake. Richard's heart dropped. The The storm outside paled in comparison to the emotional tempest brewing within him. Jonathan's eyes locked onto Richard's, simmering with a fury he could feel even across the room. "Get away from her!" Jonathan bellowed, sweeping his arm out toward Claire, a protective father charge, determined to reclaim his territory. But something in his voice held a deeper story: pain, regret, unspoken truths swirling just beneath the surface. "Dad?" Richard gasped, disbelief coating every syllable. Images of childhood flooded his mind, the disappointment, the lost laughter. The day when his father chose ambition over family. It felt like a lifetime ago, yet the wounds were still fresh. "No, no, this can't be happening." Claire's voice broke, her face alternating between confusion and fear. You shouldn't be here. None of this is safe." Jonathan's voice trembled, eyes darting to Amanda, who stood smirking in the corner, as if she knew it all. "Claire, I'm here to protect you. It's a trap." Richard's heart raced. Had Claire's return drawn Jonathan back into their lives? Was he really here to protect her? Or was it something darker? The sudden noise shifted around them. Cries erupted, pieces of glass crunched underfoot, and patrons scrambled amidst the colorful confetti still raining down. Outside, sirens wailed louder now, a cacophony that seemed to mock their chaos. "It's not a trap," Claire shouted, her voice cracking with urgency. "I'm alive. Why can't you just believe that?" Then, just as the tension peaked, Claire stepped forward, hands trembling. She reached for Jonathan, but he recoiled, like she was a specter from his past he could not face. "Claire, you were dead," Jonathan snapped, conveying disbelief like a hammer smashing stone. "I mourned you. I can't." From the depths of Lily's tense stance, she whispered, "What do you mean, dead?" The diner fell silent again, and in that stillness, the implications twisted tighter. Richard felt the world tilting. It wasn't just about Claire's survival. There were layers of betrayal, secrets intertwined like fog threading through a forest. "Richard," Jonathan turned sharply to him, the fight in his eyes flickering. "I made deals I can't explain, ones that affect all of us. I didn't want you to get dragged into this." Richard challenged, fists clenching automatically. But before Jonathan could respond, Jared, still lingering, jumped in, voice urgent. "They're here! They know she's alive!" A sudden crash outside, shouted voices, then a loud thud that sent adrenaline racing through Richard's veins. The door shuddered violently against the frame, and in that moment, clarity hit him. All this chaos, the danger, it was spun from shadows darker than he ever could have imagined. Claire's resurrection came at a cost. Jonathan's urgency morphed into something relentless, something desperate, and Richard felt his world spin like a carousel, each revelation flipping him upside down. "Will we survive this?" Richard's own shaken voice punctuated the atmosphere, barbed with fear. But before anyone could answer, the door crashed open again. This time it was a swarm of figures, clad in dark suits, faces indistinguishable, flooded into the diner. And in the middle of it all, Richard's heart seized. "Claire!" one of them shouted, voice slicing through the din, eyes glittering with intentions that left no room for hope. "Come with us now!" The truth had been unveiled, and what Richard faced was not just a fight for survival, but a reckoning with everything he believed was real. A choice lurked before him, but when it came to the stakes at hand, Richard couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to implode. The storm now raged, not just outside, but deep within his soul, threatening to tear apart the very fabric of his reality. What choice would he make when the dust finally settled? The door crashed open again, and Richard's heart raced as figures in dark suits flooded in, grim faces filled with resolve. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. A collective gasp rose from the crowd, the noise of confusion piercing the tense atmosphere. Richard stood tall, adrenaline pounding in his ears. "Claire!" One of them shouted, voice sharp enough to slice through the storm, "Come with us now!" But before Claire could register the urgency in their words, Jared stepped forward, throwing his body protectively in front of her. "You can't take her. She's not going anywhere with you." Suddenly, Richard felt the tide shift. The very air in the diner, electrified with tension, thick enough to suffocate. And then it hit him. The reality of their urgency. Whoever these people were, they knew. They knew everything, and the implications spiraled into a chilling vortex. "Back off," Claire shouted, eyes darting from Jared to Amanda to her father. Each movement was frantic, desperate to gather pieces of truth in whirling chaos. "I'm not going anywhere until someone explains what's happening." A flash of anger crossed Jonathan's face. "You don't know what you're doing." His voice shook, fists clenched at his sides. "They will destroy everything." "Destroy?" Richard echoed, confusion mixing with fury. "What do you mean? Claire's right here, alive. What danger could—" But before he could finish, another loud crash rang out. A window shattered, and more figures entered, grinning menacingly. This was no rescue. Richard's gut twisted, the tension rising like a tide ready to overflow. "Get Claire!" one of the newcomers shouted, lunging forward like a wolf in the dark. Instinct kicked in, and Richard surged into action. He grabbed Claire by the arm, pulling her back. The chaos erupted. Cries of terror echoed as patrons scrambled to find shelter. But it didn't matter. All he could see was Claire, the ghost he thought he'd lost forever, now standing at the cusp of a disaster. "Come on," he yelled, trying to steer her toward the kitchen exit. But just as they moved, a thunderous explosion rattled the diner, the walls shaking, and confusion spread like wildfire. Amidst the chaos, Richard glanced over his shoulder and froze. Jonathan stood rigid. Panic laced his expression as his eyes darted between the figures swarming in and Claire. "You have to understand. The truth will shatter everything." The room echoed with confusion and fear. Richard's heart sped as adrenaline flooded his veins. He could feel every heartbeat pulsing in his throat. But what truth? Then, in a moment that felt like a lifetime, Claire screamed, "No!" And then it happened. An intense flash of light, bright as the sun itself, enveloped the diner. It was blinding, searing pain shooting through Richard's temples, and everything turned upside down. He shielded his eyes, stepping back from the fireball forming in the center of the room. When the light dimmed, a silence descended, a heavy, suffocating silence. As Richard blinked away the spots clouding his vision, he realized Claire's hand slipped from his grasp. "No," he shouted, voice breaking as he reached out. But it was too late. Claire was gone. What stood in her place was a swirling mass of darkness, a vortex of shadows that twisted and turned like smoke caught in a tempest. Richard's mind spun. This couldn't be happening. A low, mocking laughter filled the air, and from the haze emerged a familiar silhouette. It was Amanda, her expression gleeful, eyes shining with triumph. "Didn't you see?" she sneered, leaning against the wall, a proud smirk twisting her lips. "Claire was never here. She presented herself as your salvation, but she's just another pawn, an illusion meant to lure you in. The real game has always been about control." Richard's breath caught, gut-wrenching with the weight of her revelation. The truth was unraveling before him, relationships fraying like thin threads. Claire had been a mirage, a trap set by the very people he trusted. And it hit him. The unresolved feelings he'd spun around and around were just as ephemeral as Claire herself. His world shattered again, this time into pieces sharper than glass. "Claire, where are you?" he screamed, looking into the abyss that swallowed her whole. In that moment, Richard realized he wasn't just facing a monster. He was standing in the eye of a storm where truths twisted and identities vanished, not just from view, but from existence. Fear burned within him, but somewhere deep down, a spark of defiance ignited. He needed to find the truth, whatever it was. Would he have to chase the shadows? Was it worth whatever price lay ahead? As the air thickened with darkness, he steeled himself. The truth was deeper than he knew, shrouded in pain he hadn't yet faced. But there was no turning back. Whatever came next would unravel everything he ever believed. The truth hung heavy in the air, thicker than the darkening clouds outside. Richard stood frozen, staring at the swirling shadows where Claire had been. Amanda's laughter echoed in his ears, her smirk a dagger in his heart. He was no longer just fighting for Claire. The battle now raged on multiple fronts. His mind raced. Claire wasn't just a pawn. She was a missing piece of a much larger puzzle. And now everything felt distorted. The figures in black suits surged closer. The tension became a tangible thing, making it hard to breathe. They were here for Claire. Whatever cruel game was being played was far beyond him now. "Stop!" Richard shouted, fists clenched, desperate. "What do you want?" One of the men pushed through the chaos, eyes fixed on Richard, steely and cold. "We've been sent to retrieve her. That's all you need to know." The pressure grew, Richard's heart pounding like a war drum. Amanda's gaze fixed on him, eyes bright with malice. "You think this is about you, Richard? It's never been about you. You're just a means to an end." "Shut up," he yelled, fury and despair clawing at his throat. "Claire is everything. If this is a trap, then I'll destroy it." But just then, there was an unexpected sound, the din of laughter from the back of the diner. It was wild and euphoric, cutting through the tension like a knife. Richard's heart sank as he turned, breath caught in his throat. A wide smile broke out across Jared's face. "They're here for the wrong reason, folks. Time to show you what you've been missing." And with that, he flipped a hidden switch. Suddenly, the whole diner lit up in vibrant colors. Strands of bright lights danced above as half the wall slid open, revealing a sprawling underground space filled with cheering people. The familiar tune of upbeat music pulsed like a heartbeat, and the reality of the situation shifted. It was a party, a hidden celebration beneath the chaos. "What the hell?" Richard muttered, confused. "Welcome to the true show," Jared called, pulling a confetti cannon from behind the bar like a magician revealing his tricks. "Secrets are about to unfold." The remaining figures in black shifted, surprised but unfazed, their resolve only hardened. Richard's instincts screamed at him. Something was incredibly wrong. This wasn't just a twisted rescue mission. It was something else entirely. "Is this some kind of joke?" Richard yelled, stepping forward, eyes darting between the amused partygoers and the dark figures. "What's going on?" That's when the lights flickered ominously, everything plunging into uncertainty. Jared's grin faltered for just a moment, revealing a flash of panic before he regained composure. "Just watch." But before anyone could react, a figure stepped through the swinging doors. A woman, cloaked in an air of authority and danger. As the crowd hushed, she seemed to draw shadows to her like moths to a flame. "Claire?" the woman drawled, voice cold as steel. "I believe it's time for you to return home." Richard felt the world spin as recognition settled in. This was not just any woman. It was Claire's mother, a figure he thought was lost to them both years ago. She had been presumed dead. Her disappearance was the skeleton in Claire's closet, the hidden truth that haunted their lives. "Mom?" Claire's voice was raw, a plea laced with disbelief. "Enough of the charade," her mother said, eyes narrowing on Richard. "You have no idea what you've stumbled into. You think this is about love? This is survival. There are rules you know nothing about." Richard's heart dropped. What did she mean? Everything he thought he knew about Claire, about himself, shattered as he waded through the remnants of his understanding. "Stay away from her," Richard yelled, but fear gripped his heart. But Claire stepped forward, her demeanor shifting, a determination glimmering behind the veneer of confusion. This wasn't just about her mother's return. It was about truths morphing under the pressure of secrets. "Richard, listen," Claire began, breaking into his spiraling thoughts. "You only know half the story." Just then, the lights flickered again, and an explosion of sound erupted. The lights intensified, blinding Richard momentarily. When he blinked to regain focus, Claire's mother was gone. The dark figures were retreating, but the atmosphere thickened with tension and disbelief, the party's rhythm devolving into an unsettling frenzy. "Where did she go?" Richard shouted, panic clawing at the back of his mind. "Follow her," Garrett urged, eyes darting wildly, excitement mingling with fear. But it was more than that. Richard could feel the world constricting around him, a knot tightening with every beat of his heart. And then it hit him. The ghost of Claire's mother was not just an apparition, but a new reality, a shocking truth. What are we missing? The chaos around him faded as he tried to piece the puzzle together. The party, the shadows, the truths buried deep, all were connected in ways he couldn't yet comprehend. Richard stood on the precipice, teetering toward uncertainty, drawn into the abyss. What was hidden was just the beginning, and he couldn't shake the feeling. Everything was about to change, and he would follow it, whatever it took. Richard stood at the heart of the chaos, confusion swirling around him like a tempest. Claire's mother's sudden appearance rattled him to the core. What had just unfolded left him breathless. This place felt more like a twisted game than the world he understood. "Claire, where did she go?" Richard's voice trembled as panic choked him. The vibrant lights around them flickered ominously, casting jagged shadows across the diner. I don't know," Claire's words faltered, her eyes darting to the now empty doorway where her mother had stood. She just vanished. The dark figures in suits shifted like predators sensing fear. Richard's heart raced. The urgency bubbled, tearing at him. This wasn't merely about Claire. It felt like some sinister binding. Amanda watched, her glee palpable, but now it had a different flavor, a deep satisfaction in the unraveling of their world. "Why would she do this?" Claire whispered, fingers shaking as they curled into fists. Richard's gut twisted. Everything he thought he understood crumbled like wet paper. The noise around them faded, but he could see the lights flash in Claire's eyes. Something deeper lied beneath the surface. He could feel it. "What do you mean?" he pressed, inches from her. And then it happened. A roar erupted outside, the sound of tires screeching, chaos spilling into the diner as the doors burst open once more. This time not with surprise, but with intent. Men and women in black stormed in, armed and serious, as if they had stepped out of some dark prophecy. "Get her!" one of them shouted, launching forward like a hungry beast. The crowd erupted again, screams slicing through the air. Richard's heart thudded so hard he thought it might burst. He grabbed Claire, trying to pull her to safety, but then a shockwave pulsed through the room. An explosion rang out, not from outside, but beneath their feet. The foundation shuddered violently as the floor erupted into clouds of dust and debris. "Run!" Richard yelled, but it was chaos. People screamed, tables splintered. Then Claire laughed, a sound so startling, so uncharacteristic, that it stopped Richard cold. He turned, eyes wide, breath caught. "What?" he managed, horrified. Finally, it's all coming together. Claire's expression shifted, an unnatural light flickering in her eyes. A flash, blinding and all-encompassing, surged from her, illuminating the chaos. With it came a wave of realization, crashing over him like a tide washing away the shore. "Claire!" he screamed, but awareness hit like a backlash. Something had changed. As the light receded, Richard saw who stood where Claire had been. This wasn't his Claire, the laughter, the energy. It was different. Darker. A twisted version wrought by secrets he couldn't grasp. "Welcome to the family reunion, Richard," the figure sneered, voice dripping with mockery. He staggered back, eyes darting, confusion battling rage. "What have you done?" With a derisive grin, Claire stepped forward. "I'm not just Claire. I'm part of something much bigger. And you were simply a stepping stone." The notion crashed over Richard like ice water. Heart racing, breath hit-hinched, reality splintered around him. The Claire he loved, the one who had returned, was just another layer of deception wrapped in familiar love. The crowd shifted, absorbed in terror and disarray. Someone yelled, but it was drowned out by the rising tide of anger building in Richard's chest. Was this it? This was how everything crumbled, how a love he thought to be pure turned into betrayal? Why? He managed to choke out, feeling the floor tremble beneath him like it was echoing his turmoil. Yes, why indeed? Claire's lips curled into a devilish smile, eyes glinting with a knowing light. Because the truth doesn't set you free, Richard. It binds you, and you, my dear, are utterly bound. The room exploded with energy as the dark figures surged, and then, just like that, they were closing in on him. Richard's blood ran cold, his heart racing. Fight or flight, clicking into place. It was never just about Claire. It was about something they all played a part in. And the price? It was about to come due. Everything he thought he knew was about to shatter again, leaving darkness in its wake. Would he stand against it? Or would he be swept away in the tempest, just another soul lost in the shadows? The choice loomed, heavy, dark, and Richard had to make it fast. Richard stood in the eye of the storm, panic tightening its grip. The dark figures pressed closer, their intentions clear as day. Claire's expression twisted in an unsettling mix of malice and determination. "This is about survival, Richard, not love. I can't believe you." His throat was tight, words tumbling out in fragments. "You're not her. This isn't real." He stumbled backward, heartsick, the room spinning with the weight of betrayal. The crowd around them surged, a cacophony of confusion and fear. Then suddenly, a loud crash reverberated behind the counter. Glass shattered, and all heads snapped toward the sound. Richard's stomach dropped. Jared lay on the ground, breathing heavily, struggling with a figure cloaked in black that had burst in from the diner's back exit. "Get off me!" he gasped, the struggle frantic. In an instant, the room turned chaotic. The dark figures rushed toward Jared, leaving Richard frozen, eyes darting between the chaos and Claire, who was now stepping forward boldly. "This is a distraction," she called. "No," Richard shouted, heart pounding, feeling the panic thudding in his ears. "Help him!" But he couldn't move. His feet felt cemented to the ground as fear and disbelief flooded him. How could Claire do this? And then it happened. A blinding light erupted from Jared's hand, a flicker of something powerful, something ancient. In that moment, time stretched and narrowed, and Richard watched as the diner's atmosphere shimmered, turning electric, and then it was gone. The lights flickered back on, but everything felt different. The shadows had shifted in the forms he hadn't noticed before. Gasps rippled through the room, eyes widening in horror. "Look!" someone screamed. "What's happening?" Richard turned, breath hitching. Amanda stood alone now, her eyes vacant. It was as if she was trapped in a trance, her expression frozen in shock. Behind her, Claire had transformed too, glowing with an unnatural energy, a power radiating from her like a beacon. "Claire?" His heart raced, splitting open from the inside as he stumbled forward, desperate to reach her. "What are you doing?" Then he understood too late. Amid the confusion, Claire raised her hands, and like a bolt from the blue, a pulse of light shot out. It burst into the air, and Richard's blood ran cold as the energy crackled and surged toward the dark figures. Instead of fleeing, they absorbed it. "No!" he yelled, lunging forward, trying to break the connection. But Claire's gaze was distant, unyielding. "Trust me," she yelled, voice thin. "It's the only way." And right then, the world began to unravel. The light enveloped the dark figures, and suddenly they started to dissolve, morphing into shadows that stacked higher and higher. Richard's throat tightened, a lump forming as the realization clawed at him. "Mom!" Claire shouted, eyes searching frantically through the chaos. "What?" Richard blinked. Confusion turned into cold horror as he watched the figures transform. They had been sent to retrieve Claire, but not to detain her. This was an elaborate ploy, a family reunion of sorts. The energy exploded into the air, and the diner shook. The barrier between realities peeled back, and in that moment, shadows broke free from the dark figures, rushing to Claire's side. Their forms twisted and contorted before they transformed into familiar faces. "Mom!" Claire gasped, tears streaking her face as she reached out. Suddenly, the realization struck Richard like a physical blow. What is this?" His mind reeled. "You're not just Claire. You're part of this." A chorus of voices rang out. "Welcome back, my child," echoed a voice he recognized instantly. It was Claire's mom, alive and smiling. "You've come home." The diner erupted into shocked silence, jaws dropping, hopelessness crawling through the crowd. And Richard stood in the middle of it all, suffocating in confusion. Everything he believed about Claire, about their love, splintered into shards, twisting around him, leaving him gasping for answers. "There's so much you don't understand," Claire said, her voice softening, the power draining as shadows coiled around her. "But it's time we face the truth together." A weight dropped into his stomach. What truth? He felt the edges of his world fraying, remorselessly pulling apart. Could he still trust her? Or was this just another layer of deception, crafted by an illusion for something beyond comprehension? The air crackled, alive with uncertainty, leaving Richard frozen on the edge of a reality teetering into chaos. What awaited was a dark unraveling, and he could not shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Richard stood frozen, feeling the weight of everything crashing down around him. Claire's transformation was shocking. The vibrant energy radiating off her felt suffocating and heavy. Confusion twisted inside him like a vice, squeezing tight. "Home?" he echoed, heart racing. The eyes of the crowd flicked between him and the swirling shadows gathering around Claire. The air felt electric, charged with anticipation, but all Richard could feel was the creeping dread of betrayal. "Listen, we don't have much time," Claire shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. "You need to trust me." "Trust you?" Richard felt a bubble of anger rise, threatening to spill over. "You're not the person I fell for." The crowd gasped. Whispers spread like wildfire. The tension escalated, crackling in the air. People exchanged glances, uncertainty rippling through the din. Lily stood in the corner, her eyes wide, trembling, caught in a moment of sheer disbelief. "Who is she really?" Amanda said, her voice dripping with curiosity and fear. "What kind of game is this?" And that's when it happened. Everything spiraled, plunging into chaos. A loud crash shattered the din, making everyone jump. The back wall split open, a blinding light flooding the locked room. Illuminating faces twisted in fear. "Get down!" someone shouted, panic instantaneously sweeping the diner. Richard shielded Claire instinctively, but the blinding light enveloped them both. Everything melted away. Richard felt like he was floating, suspended in a moment that felt both eternal and empty. Then it all faded. The bright light dimmed. Richard blinked hard, disoriented. The diner was no longer the same, no longer a diner at all. They stood in an expansive, otherworldly landscape. Ghostly figures floated around them, shrouded in mist, whispers carried on the wind. "Where are we?" Richard breathed, confusion gripping him. Claire, no, the twisted figure who stood in her place, smirked. "Welcome to the Convergence, our family's real domain." The figures began to swirl, and Richard felt the ground tremble beneath him. They were no longer merely patrons in a diner. They were caught in something vast and ancient. "What do you mean?" he shouted over the roar of the wind. "We need to get back." But the altered Claire just laughed, her voice echoing around them, a haunting melody. "You want the truth? This is where it's always been. The world you knew is just a facade." Suddenly, the ghostly figures around them started forming into recognizable faces, faces he had never expected to see again. His heart plummeted. "No, this can't be." "Look closely," she taunted, beckoning him forward. "See the family you were meant to be part of?" Richard's breath stopped. There, standing at the forefront, was a figure he recognized, someone long gone, someone he'd mourned bitterly. His mother. But she looked different, her eyes hollow and cold, a shell of the woman he had loved. "Mom?" His voice cracked, disbelief flooding him. It was impossible. She had died. He had buried her. "Richard, you were never supposed to know," his mother said, her voice a chilling echo. "We did this for your protection." His heart hammered in his chest, betrayal twisting it tighter. "For my protection? You kept me in the dark? About this?" Claire laughed again, a terrible sound, the depths of her eyes blackening with glee. "You were a part of something bigger. Your family's legacy intertwines with all of this." A sudden wave of realization crashed over him. Was this a game? A setup? Richard staggered backward. He felt a rush of adrenaline. This was more than just tangled relationships. It was something darker, a web spun from deceit and betrayal. "Liar!" he shouted, trying to break the grip of panic that flooded him. "I won't be part of this." But the words slipped through his fingers like sand. The crowd around him faded, faces becoming blurred echoes of doubt. He was alone, standing on the precipice of a truth he never wanted to face. "Richard," Claire said softly, stepping closer. "Join us, and you will find the power you never knew. Together, we can rewrite your past." But somewhere in her hollow gaze, Richard saw the very truth submerged in shadows. His heart pulsed with fear as he realized he didn't know who to trust anymore. And then the ground trembled violently beneath him. "No!" he screamed, his world collapsing again. The faces around him dissolved into darkness. In that instant, clarity hit him like a tidal wave. Everything had changed in ways he couldn't comprehend. What was real? What was illusion? He was caught between a family he never understood and a love that had twisted into something far beyond recognition. The shadows danced, teasing him with glimpses of secrets waiting to be uncovered, deep within the fog surrounding them. Richard took a deep breath, heart thumping furiously in his chest. Where was this leading him? Would he choose the darkness, or would he fight to uncover the truth hidden in the chaos? As the winds howled around him, he knew that whatever came next would change everything. The storm raged on, but for Richard, it felt like everything had slowed to a standstill. He was surrounded by shadows, figures that flickered between reality and despair. The energy crackled, charged with both fear and a strange sense of hope. "Join us, Richard!" Claire, a version of Claire, beckoned, her voice sweet yet sharp like glass. "We can find strength in the darkness." No, he shouted, hands trembling at his sides. This isn't what I want. In that instant, he felt the ground shift beneath him. The ghostly figures started to swirl. Familiar faces merged with shadows, morphing into memories he had thought long buried. Your family needs you, Richard, his mother's voice echoed, both a comfort and a threat. This is where you belong. He shook his head, desperation clawing at his chest. No, you abandoned me. Each word tore through his heart, raw and painful. But Claire stepped closer, her eyes capturing his, a flicker of something real breaking through the illusion. You're stronger than this, Richard. You can break free from the chains. And in that moment, a wave of clarity washed over him. This was more than just a family reunion. It was a reckoning. Tension hung thick in the air, closing in around him. A choice lay before him, like the storm clouds gathering ominously in the sky. Richard took a step back, breathing heavily. He remembered the love he had for Claire, the warmth that melted away the coldness of shadows. And then he thought of Lily, her genuine smile, the way she saw him. You're right, he shouted, voice ringing with newfound conviction. This isn't where I belong. A shattering silence enveloped the diner, so thick you could feel it tightening your throat. The shadows shifted, their faces morphing with disbelief. Richard harnessed all the strength he had left. I refuse to be a pawn in your game. And suddenly, the swirling shadows halted. They oscillated, flickering like a broken film reel. Richard felt the room shift around him. The diner morphed and faded into a vast landscape hovering on the edge of reality. Richard, Claire's voice screamed, desperation threading each word. You can't leave. You'll doom us all. No, he replied firmly, eyes blazing. I'd rather risk everything than live in lies. The connection snapped. The shadows shrieked, twisting like storm winds, before collapsing inward on themselves, evaporating into the void. The air cleared, leaving behind only the vestiges of a world woven from deceit. Richard turned away from the chaos, breathing heavy in the startled silence. He spotted Lily across the vast expanse, her eyes wide with shock, yet filled with understanding. He walked slowly toward her, his heart pounding. Is it over? She whispered, her voice trembling. For now, he said, taking her hand, a warmth spreading through him. But there's so much to figure out. The reality around them shifted once more, reforming into the familiar setting of the diner, quiet yet vibrant, life returning to the patrons. Richard could see the light returning to each face. It felt real again. A flicker of hope pulsated in the air, but the darkness would always linger. As Richard and Lily stood hand in hand, he felt the weight of uncertainty. Questions pulled at him like shadows on the fringes of his thoughts. What would become of Claire, the truth buried in fragments? What about the family he barely knew, still entwined in the web of darkness? They faced the diner, now filled with laughter and warmth. Yet a storm brewed beyond the shimmering glass, waiting for the right moment to surge forth. Whatever happens next, Richard said softly to Lily, we face it together. And as they turned to confront their future, the sense of uncertainty hung in the air, poised on the brink of their next chapter. Now you must subscribe immediately to our channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Trust us, you've got to be here for what's coming next. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm. Your support means the world. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this ending.